6 months passed after the battle for Earth. News traveled slowly across the galaxy, but eventually, everyone heard what had happened. The Valkyrie Empire, undefeated for 10,000 years, had been broken by a species that had barely left its own solar system. The other civilizations could not believe it at first. The Sethrani, a race of tall beings with silver skin and gentle voices, had been slaves of the Valkyrie for 300 years. When they heard the news, they wept with joy. The Koroth, a species of small furry creatures who had lost their homeworld to Valkyrie conquest, immediately began planning their rebellion. The Minari, ancient beings of living light who had been hunted nearly to extinction, emerged from hiding for the first time in centuries. All of them wanted to know the same thing. How have the humans done it? The answer spread like fire through dry grass. Railguns. Simple, brutal, kinetic weapons. Metal thrown so fast that nothing could stop it. The Valkyrie had armored their ships with crystal plates meters thick. The humans had simply hit those plates harder than anything had ever hit them before. On Earth, Katie Brooks was promoted to captain and given command of a new ship. But she did not receive one of the human vessels. Instead, she was given the captured Eternal Dominion, renamed the USS Remember. It was a symbol of victory, but also of change. The ship's crew was a mix of humans and former Valkyrie, prisoners who had chosen to defect, rather than return to their fallen empire. Admiral Dexner was kept in comfortable custody on Earth. He spent his days talking to human scientists and historians, explaining the Valkyrie way of war. He was not mistreated. He was given good food and a nice room with a view of the mountains. It confused him more than any torture would have. "Why do you treat me this way?" he asked one day. His human guard, a young woman named Lisa, had brought him a cup of tea. "I tried to enslave your species. I would have killed billions of your people." Lisa shrugged. "You lost. War's over. What's the point of being cruel now?" Dexner had no answer for that. His species had always been cruel to the defeated. It was how they maintained control. Fear and pain and suffering. But the humans did not seem to need those things. They had won through sheer force, and now they were building something different. 3 months after the battle, the first alien delegation arrived at Earth. They came in small ships, barely armed, flying white flags that meant peace in a dozen different languages. The Sethrani, the Koroth, the Minari, and others, species whose names humans had never heard before. They met with Admiral Price in Geneva, in a conference room overlooking the lake. Katie was there as well, standing at the Admiral's side. She had become something of a hero, though she did not like the attention. "We have come to ask for your help," the Sethrani ambassador said. Her name was Vela, and she spoke with a voice like singing bells. "The Valkyrie Empire is collapsing. Their fleet was their power, and you destroyed it. Now their subject species are rising up. There is chaos across 1,000 worlds." Admiral Price nodded slowly. He was older now, more tired. The battle had taken something out of him, but his eyes were still sharp. "What kind of help do you need?" he asked. "Your weapons," Vela said. "Your railguns. We wish to learn how to build them. With such weapons, we could defend ourselves against anyone who tries to conquer us again." The room fell silent. This was the question everyone had been waiting for. Would humanity share its greatest weapon? Would they give other species the power to defend themselves? Or would they keep the technology secret, maintaining their advantage? Katie watched the Admiral's face. She knew what she would do. She hoped he felt the same way. "We will share the technology," Admiral Price said finally. "But understand something. This is not about revenge. The Valkyrie hurt you, and I know you want to hurt them back. But if we start down that road, we become just like them. We become conquerors." Vela bowed her head. "What do you suggest?" We suggest building something new. A defense alliance. All species working together to protect each other. No more empires. No more conquest. Just free people, defending their freedom. It was a grand idea. Maybe too grand. The galaxy was big and old and full of anger. There were species out there who would never forgive the Valkyrie. There were wounds that might never heal, but it was a start. Over the next few years, humanity taught the other species how to build railguns. The technology spread across the galaxy like a wave. Soon, even the smallest civilizations had weapons that could punch through any armor. The age of conquest was over. No empire could survive when every enemy could shoot back. The Valkyrie Empire officially dissolved 8 months after the battle for Earth. Their home world became just another planet, no more powerful than any other. Some of their people adapted to the new reality. Others could not accept it. There were scattered battles, rebellions, acts of terrorism. But the old power was gone forever. Katie Brooks spent the next 5 years patrolling the old Valkyrie trade routes in the USS Remember. Her crew grew and changed. Humans worked alongside Sethrani and Koroth, and even a few reformed Valkyrie. They protected merchants. They stopped pirates. They helped refugees find new homes. One day, Danny Marsh came to her bridge with a familiar message. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal. Civilian freighter under attack by raiders." Katie smiled. Some things never changed. "Set an intercept course," she ordered, "and warm up the main gun." The Remember turned toward the signal, its engines glowing bright against the stars. Somewhere out there, someone needed help. And humanity, as always, was ready to throw rocks at the problem dot as her ship flew into the darkness. Katie thought about how far they had come. A few years ago, humans had never met an alien. Now, they were the guardians of a free galaxy. They had earned that position not through cruelty or conquest, but through simple physics and stubborn engineering. The Valkyrie had armored their ships. Human railguns had turned them into debris. And in the wreckage of that old empire, something new was growing. Something better. The stars stretched out before her, full of possibilities. Full of challenges. Full of problems that needed solving. Katie settled back in her chair and watched. The universe roll by. Physics doesn't care about your armor, she thought. And neither do we. The end. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species. Its walls stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Floating platforms carried delegates from 47 different alien races, each one representing billions of lives across thousands of worlds. The air smelled of 100 different atmospheres, mixed together by machines that kept everyone alive. Ambassador Daniel Price walked slowly toward the central platform. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. His black uniform was simple compared to the bright colors and strange shapes worn by the alien delegates around him. He had been coming to this hall for 20 years, always asking for the same things, always being told no. Today would be different. Behind him walked his aide, Katie Morris. She was young, only 32, but she had already seen enough to understand why Daniel looked so tired. She carried a small device that held 300 years of human history in the galaxy. 300 years of sacrifice. 300 years of being treated like servants. The Tessari High Counselor, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish wrapped in golden robes, raised one of his many tentacles for silence. His name was Vorith, and he had been the most powerful voice in the galaxy for 50 years. "Ambassador Price," Vorith said, his voice coming through a translator that made it sound cold and flat. "You requested an emergency session. This is unusual. Humans do not usually make demands." Daniel reached the central platform and stood there for a moment, looking around at all the faces watching him. Some looked bored. Others looked annoyed. A few looked curious. None of them looked friendly. "I am not here to make demands," Daniel said. His voice was calm and quiet. "I am here to say goodbye." The hall went silent. Even the machines seemed to stop humming. Daniel touched the button on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared in the air above him. It showed images, thousands of them, one after another. "The Volani homeworld," Daniel said as the first image appeared. It showed a beautiful green planet covered in forests. 40 years ago, the Chorus swarm came to eat everything on this world. Every other species refused to help. They said it was too dangerous, too far away. Not their problem. The image changed to show human soldiers in heavy armor, fighting against creatures that looked like giant insects with razor-sharp claws. 12,000 human Marines died in the tunnels beneath the Volani forests. They fought for 3 months without rest. They saved 4 billion Volani lives. The image changed again. This time, it showed a massive sun, swollen and red, about to explode. "The Ashkari system," Daniel continued. "Their star was dying. No one had ships big enough to evacuate their population. No one except us." The display showed human cargo ships, hundreds of them, flying through radiation that killed their crews slowly over weeks of rescue missions. 800 human pilots died from radiation sickness. They made 6,000 trips. They saved the entire Ashkari species. More images followed. Human doctors working without sleep to cure plagues. Human engineers building emergency shelters on frozen moons. Human soldiers holding defensive lines while civilians escaped. Human scientists solving problems that had confused alien researchers for centuries. "For 300 years, Daniel said, humanity has answered every call for help. We have bled for species who would not bleed for us. We have died for people who would not even let us walk freely on their worlds." He paused and looked directly at Vareth. "And how has the galaxy thanked us?" The images changed again. Now, they showed something different. Human children being turned away from alien schools. Human merchants being charged prices 10 times higher than anyone else. Human colonies being denied medicine and food during shortages, while alien worlds received everything they needed. "The Centauri Accords," Daniel said, "passed by this council 15 years ago. It removed humanity's voting rights. We can no longer speak in this chamber except when invited. We have no say in laws that affect our own people." The hall remained silent. Some delegates looked away, unable to meet Daniel's eyes. The Meridian sanctions, passed 12 years ago. Human space has been blockaded ever since. We cannot trade freely. We cannot travel freely. We are prisoners in our own territory, punished for crimes we never committed. "Ambassador Price," Vareth interrupted, his tentacles waving nervously. "These matters are complex. There were security concerns. Humans breed too quickly. Your population was becoming dangerous?" Daniel asked. "Is that the word you're looking for?" "We were becoming dangerous because there were too many of us who might ask why we keep dying for people who hate us." Vareth had no answer. Daniel reached up and removed a small golden pin from his chest. It was the ambassador's seal, given to him when he first took this job. He had worn it with pride for 20 years, believing that one day things would change, that the galaxy would finally see humans as equals. He placed the pin on the podium. "I am no longer your ambassador," he said. "Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Compact. Every treaty we have signed is now void. Every promise we have made is now broken." The hall exploded into noise. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages. Platforms crashed into each other as delegates tried to move closer. "You cannot do this," someone screamed. "Who will protect the border colonies?" The Korath will attack within months. Daniel turned and began walking away. Kitty fell into step beside him, her face pale but determined. All human personnel will be recalled immediately, Daniel said without looking back. All humanitarian missions will end. All military support will be withdrawn. You will have 30 days to evacuate any aliens currently in human space. Wait. Vareth's voice cut through the chaos. Ambassador Daniel, please. We can discuss this. We can negotiate. Daniel stopped. He turned around one last time and looked at the High Counselor. You have had 300 years to negotiate, he said. You had 300 years of humans dying for your causes, saving your worlds, solving your problems. And you spent all that time making our lives harder, treating us like animals, teaching your children that we were lesser beings. He shook his head slowly. We're done negotiating. We're done begging for scraps of respect. We're done dying for people who will not even say thank you. He walked out of the hall, Katie beside him. The doors closed behind them with a sound like a coffin sealing shut in the chaos that followed. No one noticed a small Villani delegate in the corner, tears running down her face. Her name was Tessa, and she was old enough to remember the human soldiers who had saved her world. She was old enough to remember promising them that the galaxy would never forget their sacrifice. The galaxy had forgotten, and now it was too late. 6 months passed after humanity left the Galactic Compact. At first, most alien species celebrated. The humans were gone. No more watching them rush to every emergency and making everyone else look bad. No more dealing with their strange emotions and their annoying habit of caring about strangers. But slowly, quietly, the galaxy began to change. Captain Louis Vega sat in the command chair of the starship Resolute. The ship was old but well-maintained, one of the many patrol vessels that used to protect the outer edges of civilized space. Now it only patrolled human territory, back and forth along invisible borders that no alien was allowed to cross. Captain, said Lieutenant Hannah Cole from her station. We're picking up a distress signal. Louise looked at the screen. The signal was coming from a Tessari colony world, about 4 hours away at full speed. The data showed raiders attacking civilian targets. Thousands of people were dying. Can you identify the raiders? Louise asked. Looks like Vorn pirates, sir. A big group. At least 30 ships. Louise remembered the Vorn. Nasty creatures that looked like walking sharks. They had raided human colonies too, back before the withdrawal. Every time, human ships had responded. Every time, humans had fought and bled to protect people who were not their own. And every time, the Council had refused to punish the Vorn. Too much trouble, they said. The Vorn were useful for keeping certain sectors unstable. Better to let humans deal with them. What are your orders, Captain? Hannah asked. Her finger was already hovering over the navigation controls. Old habits died hard. Lois thought about his brother, Marco. He had been a Marine, stationed at a Tessari outpost near the border. When raiders attacked that outpost, Marco had stayed behind to cover the evacuation of Tessari civilians. He had died holding a doorway, his body so damaged that they could only identify him by his DNA. The Tessari had sent a medal. They had also sent a notice informing the family that humans were no longer welcome in Tessari space. The 2 documents had arrived on the same day. Log the signal, Louis said quietly. Continue our patrol route. Sir? Hannah turned to look at him. There are civilians out there. Children. There are always children, Lieutenant. Louis kept his eyes on the screen, watching the distress signal blink. Let the Council send their own ships. We're not the galaxy's heroes anymore. Hannah's hands trembled, but she entered the commands. The Resolute turned away from the signal and continued its patrol. Behind them, the blinking light grew fainter until it disappeared from their screens entirely, across human space. Similar scenes played out every day, The hospital ship Mercy had been famous throughout the galaxy. For 200 years, it had traveled wherever help was needed, its doctors and nurses treating anyone regardless of species. Now it orbited Earth, its massive hull quiet and dark, except for the sections treating human patients. Dr. Samuel Green stood in one of the empty wards, looking out at the stars. He was 53 years old and had spent most of his life on the Mercy, traveling from crisis to crisis, saving lives that no one else would save. "You could still help them," said a voice behind him. Samuel turned to see his daughter, Nina, standing in the doorway. She was 25, a doctor herself now, trained in the same traditions of service that had guided Samuel's entire life. "Help who?" Samuel asked. "Anyone. Everyone." Nina walked over to stand beside him. "The news says there's a plague spreading through the Outer Rim. Millions are sick. No one knows how to cure it." "We know how to cure it," Samuel said. "We developed a treatment 10 years ago when the same plague hit human colonies. We offered to share it with the council. What happened? They said our research methods were suspicious. They said we might have created the plague ourselves. They refused to accept our help and told us to stay away from their territory." Nina was silent for a long moment. "And now?" "Now they're dying." Samuel's voice was heavy with old grief. "And we're staying away from their territory, just like they asked." On the Villani homeworld, the research station stood empty. Dr. Samuel Green had spent 20 years there, studying the unique plants and animals that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. His work had helped preserve dozens of species from extinction. Elder Tessa stood in the abandoned laboratory, running her four-fingered hand over the dusty equipment. She remembered the day Samuel had arrived, young and eager, full of questions about her world. She remembered how he had worked alongside Villani scientists as equals, never asking for special treatment, never complaining about the long hours or difficult conditions. "Why did we let them go?" asked a young Villani behind her. His name was Kieran, and he had been Samuel's assistant for the last 5 years before the withdrawal. "We didn't let them go," Tessa said. "We pushed them away. For 300 years, we pushed them away. But we never supported the sanctions. Our government voted against them. Our government voted against them in public." Tessa turned to face him, her old eyes filled with shame. "But in private, they told the Tessari that we would not interfere. When the time came to stand with humanity, we chose to stand aside." Kieran looked at the empty room, at the research that would never be completed, at the species that would now go extinct because no one else cared enough to save them. "What happens now?" he asked. Tessa had no answer. None of them did. In the cold space between stars, a Tessari transport ship drifted without power. Its engines had failed 3 days ago, and its distress signal had been broadcasting ever since. On board were 2,000 civilians, including 300 children on their way to a new colony. The captain, a Tessari named Vorn, stood on his dark bridge and watched his crew slowly dying. The air was getting thin. The temperature was dropping. In another day, maybe 2, they would all be dead. "Any response to our signal?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Nothing, Captain. No one is coming." Vorn closed his eyes. He thought about all the times humans had appeared out of nowhere to save ships just like his. They had never asked for payment. They had never demanded favors. They had simply helped because helping was what they did. "Keep broadcasting," he said. "Someone will come?" But no one came. Not that day. Not the next. The transport was found 3 weeks later by a Tessari patrol. Everyone on board was dead, frozen in the endless cold of space. Among the bodies were 300 children who had never reached their new home. The report noted that a human patrol ship had been in range of the distress signal. It had logged the transmission and continued on its route without responding. No one could explain why, and no one dared to ask. 3 years after humanity withdrew from the galaxy, everything began to fall apart. The Chorus swarm had always been a threat. They were creatures of hunger, billions of insect-like beings that moved from world to world, eating everything in their path. For 200 years, human soldiers had held the line against them, fighting in tunnels and trenches, dying by the thousands to keep the swarm contained. Now there were no human soldiers on the border, and the swarm was hungry. The first colony to fall was called New Haven. It was a Tsari farming world, home to 8 million people who grew food for a dozen nearby systems. The swarm arrived without warning, their ships blocking out the stars like a living cloud. The colonists sent out distress calls. They begged for help from anyone who could hear them. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting that lasted 6 hours. By the time they finished arguing about who should respond, New Haven was gone. 8 million people, eaten alive while politicians debated. The second colony fell a month later. Then the third. Then the fourth. Counselor Myra of the Ashkari stood before the emergency session, her forearms spread wide in desperation. She was old now, one of the last survivors of the Great Evacuation, when human pilots had flown through deadly radiation to save her entire species. "We need to form a response fleet," she said. "The swarm is expanding faster than we predicted. If we don't stop them now, they will reach the inner systems within 2 years." High Counselor Vorath nodded his tentacles in agreement. "I propose we assemble ships from all member species. The Tsari will contribute 50 warships. We call upon the other members to match our commitment." Silence filled the chamber. The Volani representative coughed nervously. "Our ships are designed for research, not combat. We cannot spare them for military operations." "The Korthan Dominion has its own border concerns," said another delegate. "We cannot weaken our defenses." "The Ashkari fleet is still rebuilding after the Civil War," Myra admitted. "We have only 12 combat-ready vessels." One by one, every species found a reason why they could not help. Their ships were too old. Their crews were not trained. Their borders were too important. Their economies could not handle the cost. Vorath watched in growing horror as his coalition fell apart. For the first time in his long life, he understood something terrible. Humans had not been special because they were stronger or smarter than other species. They had been special because they were willing to help when no one else would. They had been the only ones who actually cared about strangers. "What about the humans?" someone asked quietly. "Could we request their assistance?" "The humans are gone," Vorath said. "And even if they weren't, why would they help us? We spent 3 centuries treating them like servants. We stripped them of their rights. We blockaded their space. We let their children die while we debated politics. Perhaps if we apologized, some things cannot be fixed with apologies." The council eventually assembled a response fleet. It was smaller than they had hoped, crewed by soldiers who had never seen real combat, commanded by admirals who had spent their careers attending ceremonies. Instead of fighting wars, the fleet met the swarm at the edge of Tsari space. The battle lasted 4 hours. The swarm lost nothing. The council fleet lost everything. On a small moon in neutral space, far from the dying colonies and burning worlds, a bar called The Last Stop served drinks to anyone who could pay. It was run by a retired human admiral named Patricia Shaw, a woman with silver hair and a mechanical arm that she had gotten after a Korath attack 30 years ago. The bar was full tonight. Human veterans sat at tables, drinking quietly, watching the news feeds that showed the galaxy falling apart. Occasionally, an alien traveler would stop in, desperate for passage or information or just a place to hide. A young man named Chris sat at the bar, nursing a drink he couldn't afford. He had been a Marine before the withdrawal, stationed on the Volani border. He had fought the swarm in the tunnels, watched his friends die, carried wounded civilians to safety while monsters tore at his armor. Shouldn't we do something? He asked Patricia, gesturing at the newsfeed. The Ashkari are being slaughtered. Women and children. We could help them. Patricia poured herself a drink and sat down beside him. We're not allowed in their space, remember? The Meridian sanctions. The sanctions were wrong. Everyone knows that now. Do they? Patricia raised an eyebrow. I don't recall anyone apologizing. I don't recall anyone lifting the blockade. I don't recall anyone saying thank you for all those years of dying for us. We're sorry we treated you like garbage. Chris had no answer. You want to know something funny? Patricia continued. When I was young, I used to think we were making a difference. Every life we saved, every world we protected, I thought it meant something. I thought eventually they would see us as friends. She took a long drink, but they never did. To them, we were just tools. Useful when needed, thrown away when not. The more we sacrificed, the more they hated us for it. Because every time we rushed to help someone, it reminded them that they weren't willing to do the same. The door opened, and a Villani stumbled in. She was young, maybe 30 in human years, and her clothes were torn and dirty. She had the look of someone who had been running for a long time. Please, she said, approaching the bar. I need passage to Earth. I need to speak to someone in charge. Patricia looked at her without expression. Why? Because my world is dying. The swarm will reach Villani Prime in 6 months. We need help. I seem to remember the Villani telling us they didn't need human help anymore. Something about our methods being too aggressive, our culture being too violent. The young Villani, her name was Siren, lowered her head in shame. That was wrong. We were wrong. Please. Patricia studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed and poured a glass of water. Sit down, she said. You look like you're about to collapse. We'll talk about passage in the morning. Siren took the water with trembling hands. Thank you. I know we don't deserve. No, Patricia interrupted. You don't. But I'm not going to let you die of thirst just because your government are idiots. She turned back to her drink, leaving Siren alone with her guilt and her fear. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the swarm was getting closer. And the galaxy, for all its vast power and ancient wisdom, had no idea how to stop it. They had built their civilization on the assumption that someone else would always save them. Now that someone was gone, and the bill was finally coming due. 5 years after humanity left the Galactic Compact, the Council finally admitted what everyone already knew. They needed help. They needed humans. High Counselor Varroth called the emergency meeting himself. The Great Hall was quieter now than it had ever been. So many species had lost representatives to the wars and plagues and disasters that kept spreading through the galaxy. Empty platforms floated where delegates had once argued and voted and made decisions that shaped the lives of trillions. We have made terrible mistakes, Varroth said. His voice was tired, and his golden robes hung loosely on his shrinking body. The stress of the past 5 years had aged him more than the previous century. We treated humanity with cruelty and ingratitude. We punished them for being what we needed them to be. And now we are paying the price for our foolishness. No one disagreed. No one had the energy to argue anymore. I propose that we send a delegation to Earth, Varroth continued. We will apologize. We will offer reparations. We will beg them to return. Siren stood up. She had risen quickly in Villani politics after returning from human space. One of the few voices willing to speak honestly about what her people had done wrong. It was not just neglect, she said. We need to understand that. We did not simply forget to thank the humans. We actively worked to harm them. The Centauri Accords were designed to remove their political power. The Meridian sanctions were economic warfare meant to keep them weak and dependent. Why? Asked a young Corthan delegate. He was new, replacing someone who had died when the swarm reached his homeworld. Why did we do these things? Siren was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Because we were jealous, she finally said. Humans made us feel small. Every time they rushed to save someone, it reminded us that we were not willing to do the same. Every sacrifice they made showed how selfish we really were. So we punished them for our own weakness. The words hung in the air like poison. Everyone knew they were true. The past cannot be changed, Voreth said. We can only try to fix the present. Will you join the delegation, Representative Siren? Siren nodded. I will go. But I must warn you, I have spent time with humans. I have seen how deeply we hurt them. An apology may not be enough. Then what will be enough? I don't know. Perhaps nothing. The delegation was assembled within a week. It included Voreth himself, Siren, and representatives from every major species that had ever received human assistance. They brought gifts and documents and promises of reform. They rehearsed their speeches and practiced their apologies. Their ship traveled to the edge of human space, to a small station that marked the border between human territory and the rest of the galaxy. It was the only place where aliens were allowed to request entry. A single human official met them at the station. Her name was Grace Perry, and she was 43 years old. She had gray streaks in her brown hair and the kind of tired patience that came from years of dealing with difficult situations. Welcome to Station 12, she said. Her voice was polite but not warm. How can I help you? Voreth stepped forward, his tentacles arranged in a gesture of respect that humans probably didn't recognize. We are here on behalf of the Galactic Council, he said. We wish to speak with the leaders of humanity. We have come to apologize and to ask for your return. Grace nodded slowly. I'll pass along your message. When can we expect a response? When humanity decides to give one. The delegation waited at Station 12 for 3 weeks. They were given comfortable rooms and good food, but no one would speak to them about anything important. Grace answered their questions with polite non-answers. Other humans walked past them without making eye contact. During the second week, Siren managed to start a conversation with a young human named Alex, who worked in the station's maintenance section. He was fixing a lighting panel in the hallway when she approached him. May I ask you something? She said. Alex looked at her with neither hostility nor friendliness. Sure. Are your people angry with us? He thought about it for a moment. Some are. My grandfather died fighting the swarm on a Tassari colony. He never got a medal or a thank you, or even an acknowledgement that he existed. So yeah, my family's not too happy about that. I'm sorry. Are you? Alex put down his tools and looked at her directly. Because I've heard a lot of apologies from aliens in the past few years. They always come when you need something. They never came before. Siren had no response. It was the truth. You want to know what really hurts? Alex continued. It's not the sanctions or the accords or any of that political stuff. It's that we spent 300 years treating you like family, and you treated us like hired help. We gave you everything we had, and you took it for granted. We were wrong. Yeah, you were. Alex picked up his tools again. And now you're here because the swarm is eating your worlds, and you don't know how to stop them. Not because you realized we were people who deserved respect. Because you need us again. He went back to work, leaving Siren alone in the hallway at the end of the 3rd week. Grace finally called the delegation to a meeting room. She stood at the head of a long table, a small device in her hand. I have spoken with my superiors, she said. They have considered your request carefully. Voreth leaned forward eagerly. And they have declined. The words fell like stones into still water. Humanity will not return to the Galactic Compact. We will not provide military assistance. We will not resume humanitarian missions. The decision is final. But why? Counselor Mira asked, her forearms spread in desperation. We have apologized. We have offered reparations. What more do you want from us? Grace looked at her with something that might have been pity. You still don't understand, she said. You think this is about payment, about saying the right words and signing the right documents. But it's not. You broke something that cannot be fixed with treaties and promises. What did we break? Trust. Grace's voice was soft but firm. 300 years of sacrifice, and you never trusted us. You never believed we were helping you because we cared. You always assumed we had secret motives, hidden agendas, plans to take over the galaxy. No matter what we did, you never stopped being afraid of us. The room was silent. We're not angry anymore, Grace continued. Anger fades with time. What we feel now is sadness. Sadness that we gave you everything, and it wasn't enough. Sadness that you couldn't see us as friends, no matter how hard we tried. Lorith's tentacles drooped. Is there nothing we can do? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Go home, she finally said. Learn to save yourselves. Maybe in 1,000 years, when all of us are gone and only the stories remain, your children will find our children somewhere in the stars. Maybe they can do better than we did. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the delegation alone with their failure. Siren stayed at the table long after the others had left. She thought about Alex and his grandfather. She thought about all the human soldiers who had died for her people, whose names she had never learned, whose sacrifices she had never honored. For the first time in her life, she truly understood what her species had lost, and she knew they would never get it back.